The solar system teetered on the edge of discord. Humanity had conquered the stars, but remained shackled by its oldest flaw: division. Earth, a shimmering beacon of history and tradition, ruled over its distant colonies with an iron grip. Mars, its red sands alive with defiance, and Titan, cloaked in the mist of its methane-rich atmosphere, had grown weary of servitude. For centuries, the colonies had endured Earth's dominance, exporting minerals and technology in exchange for dwindling resources and restrictive oversight. But the whispers of rebellion were no longer faint. They echoed across the void. Sarah Kellen stepped onto the observation deck of the Solara Nexus, an interplanetary station orbiting just beyond the moon. The station thrummed with activity as diplomats, military officials, and corporate executives milled about, their movements a microcosm of humanity's precarious balance. She gazed out at Earth, its blue and green surface a sharp contrast to the cold, sterile corridors of the station. She had grown up in the lush landscapes of the Pacific Coalition, believing in the unity her planet represented. But the cracks in that unity were undeniable now. "You look like someone trying to solve a puzzle without all the pieces," a voice said behind her. Sarah turned to see Cale Renard, the Martian delegate, his sharp features illuminated by the soft glow of the observation deck. He carried himself with the confidence of someone who had seen too much yet refused to falter. Unlike Earth's polished diplomats, Cale wore the practical, rugged attire of a man who had spent years in the harsh Martian outlands. His fiery speeches had made him a hero to the colonies, but Sarah saw more than charisma in his dark eyes. She saw a man weighed down by the lives depending on him. "Maybe I am," she replied, folding her arms, "though I'm not sure the pieces even fit together." Cale smirked. "That's because you're trying to put together someone else's puzzle. Earth doesn't want unity, Sarah. It wants control." She bristled at his words, though she couldn't entirely disagree. "And Mars wants independence, no matter the cost. How many lives are you willing to gamble, Cale?" His smirk faded. "The cost of submission is always greater than the cost of freedom. You of all people should know that." Before she could respond, a low chime echoed through the deck, signaling the start of the summit. The two walked side by side toward the council chamber, their silence fraught with unspoken arguments. The chamber itself was a marvel of engineering, its domed ceiling displaying a holographic view of the solar system. Delegates from Earth, Mars, and Titan filled the room, their expressions ranging from wary to openly hostile. At the center of the room stood the Earth representative, High Minister Ellis Tanaka, a figure whose calm demeanor masked an unyielding resolve. "Ladies and gentlemen," Tanaka began, her voice measured but commanding, "we are here to address the growing unrest among our colonies. Let us find a path forward that preserves the stability and prosperity of our great species." Cale rose from his seat, his tone sharp. "Stability and prosperity for whom, Minister? Mars and Titan have carried Earth's burdens for decades, yet our people struggle to survive while Earth reaps the rewards." Tanaka's expression didn't waver. "The colonies are an integral part of humanity's progress. Your contributions ensure our collective survival. We all benefit." Cale's laugh was bitter. "Collective survival? Tell that to the miners suffocating in Martian tunnels, or the farmers rationing water on Titan. We're not asking for charity. We're demanding equality." The room erupted into murmurs, some delegates nodding in agreement, while others whispered disapproval. Sarah watched from her seat, her mind racing. Cale's words struck a chord, but she knew Earth's position wasn't entirely without merit. The colony's independence would disrupt the fragile economic web that kept humanity thriving. Yet, as she looked around the room, she saw the widening chasm between the sides, a chasm that dialogue alone might not bridge. The summit's tension escalated when an aide burst into the room, his face pale. "Minister Tanaka, we received reports of an explosion at the Solara trade hub near Titan." A hushed silence fell over the chamber. The trade hub was a vital link in the interplanetary supply chain, its destruction a devastating blow. Tanaka's composure cracked, her eyes narrowing. "Do we have any information on the perpetrators?" The aide hesitated. Initial reports suggest it was a deliberate act. The evidence points to Martian insurgents. Kale shot to his feet. "That's absurd. Mars had no reason to target a hub that benefits all of us. This is a setup." The room descended into chaos, accusations flying across the chamber. Sarah's heart pounded as she tried to process the implications. If Mars was indeed responsible, Earth would have every justification to tighten its grip, or worse, retaliate. But if Kale was right, someone else was pulling the strings. "Enough!" Tanaka's voice cut through the noise. "We will investigate this incident thoroughly. Until then, I expect all parties to refrain from further provocations." As the delegates reluctantly settled, Sarah caught Kale's eye. His expression was a mix of anger and desperation, and for a fleeting moment, she felt the weight of his burden. Whatever had happened at Titan, it was only the beginning. Later, as the summit adjourned, Sarah found herself wandering the corridors, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts. She had joined this delegation believing in diplomacy, in humanity's ability to resolve its differences. But the events of the day had shaken that belief. The seeds of division were deeply rooted, their growth accelerated by fear and mistrust. Kale intercepted her in a dimly lit hallway. "You know this isn't just about Mars," he said, his voice low. "Something bigger is at play here." She studied him, searching for deceit but finding only sincerity. "And you think you can stop it by breaking away from Earth?" "I think it's the only way to save my people," he said. "But I can't do it alone." Sarah hesitated. Aligning herself with Kale meant risking everything she'd worked for. Yet, as she looked into his eyes, she realized the path forward wasn't as clear-cut as she once believed. "Then let's figure out who's really behind this," she said finally. "Before it's too late." Kale nodded, a glimmer of hope breaking through his stoic exterior. As they walked away together, the corridor seemed darker, the weight of what lay ahead pressing heavily on them both. The seeds of division had been sown, but whether they would bear fruit or be uprooted remained to be seen. The aftermath of the explosion at the Titan trade hub rippled across the solar system, leaving chaos in its wake. Official statements poured in from Earth, condemning the act as Martian aggression, while Mars vehemently denied responsibility. Titan's leaders, long overshadowed by the larger players, called for an independent investigation, their pleas drowned out by the growing din of blame. News feeds churned with speculation, their reports feeding public outrage. Sarah watched the flames of division spread, her efforts to douse them feeling increasingly futile. Inside the Solara Nexus, the air seemed heavier, as though the station itself mirrored the tension among its occupants. Sarah sat at a sleek conference table in a private meeting room, scrolling through reports of the incident. The evidence was damning, too damning. Surveillance footage showed a Martian vessel near the hub moments before the explosion, but the ship's identity remained conveniently untraceable. To Sarah, it felt staged, a performance scripted to provoke war. Still trying to make sense of the chaos, Kale's voice broke her concentration. He entered the room with his usual confidence, though his expression was grim. He tossed a data pad onto the table, its display flashing red. Earth's already mobilizing their fleets. They've declared Mars a threat to planetary security. Sarah looked up sharply. "They're escalating this too fast. There's no proof, just circumstantial evidence." "Proof doesn't matter when fear takes hold," Kale said, pulling out a chair across from her. "Earth's scared of losing control, and they'll do whatever it takes to crush us before we gain momentum." She hesitated, studying him. "Do you think the colonies are ready for this? War won't end with independence. It'll leave scars that take generations to heal." Kale leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Do you think we have a choice? If we stand down, Earth will tighten its grip until there's nothing left to fight for. This is about survival, Sarah. For all of us." His words hung in the air, heavy with truth. She couldn't deny the grim reality of his perspective, but she wasn't ready to abandon the possibility of peace. There has to be another way, she said. Something we're missing? Kale's eyes narrowed. If there is, we'd better find it soon. Earth isn't waiting, and neither are my people. They're tired of waiting. Their conversation was cut short by the sudden arrival of a third figure, Commander Elias Vren, Earth's military representative. His crisp uniform and cold demeanor exuded authority, and his piercing gaze swept over the room like a predator assessing its prey. Diplomat Kellen, Delegate Renard, he said, his voice sharp and clipped. I've been informed that Earth's fleet will arrive at Mars' orbital perimeter within 72 hours. Their orders are to ensure compliance with Earth's governance. Kale shot to his feet, his fists clenched. Compliance? You mean submission. You're threatening an entire planet. Vren didn't flinch. Earth's position is clear. We will not tolerate acts of terrorism or rebellion. Mars has one final opportunity to prove its innocence by surrendering its leaders for questioning. Questioning? Kale spat. You mean execution? You've already made up your minds. Sarah stood, placing herself between the two men. Commander, this isn't the way. If Earth escalates this conflict, it will push the colonies further away. We need to de-escalate, not provoke. Vren's gaze shifted to her, unyielding. Diplomat Kellen, your idealism is admirable, but naive. Mars has forced our hand. Peace is a luxury we can no longer afford. With that, he turned and left, the hiss of the door punctuating his departure. Kale let out a sharp breath, running a hand through his hair. That man is the embodiment of everything wrong with Earth's leadership. Sarah sat back down, feeling the weight of the situation pressing against her. He's not the problem, Kale. He's just a symptom. Someone or something is pushing both sides toward this conflict. We need to find out who. Kale stared at her for a moment before nodding. I might have a lead. A few of my people intercepted a data transmission from one of Earth's corporate networks. It referenced a covert project, something called Directive Umbra. Corporate involvement? Sarah frowned. That would explain the sabotage. If the corporations profit from war, they'd have every reason to fan the flames. Kale's expression darkened. Mars has always suspected the corporations of manipulating Earth's policies, but we've never been able to prove it. If Directive Umbra is what I think it is, this could be the key. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden alarm blaring through the station. The room's display flickered, showing a live feed of a Martian vessel under attack by Earth patrols near Solar Nexus. The screen filled with flashing lights and streaking lasers as the ship's shields buckled under the assault. Kale's face hardened. They're making their move. Sarah's heart pounded. We need to stop this. If either side fires first, it'll be war. Kale grabbed her arm. Then come with me. I have a ship docked at Base 7. If this is the start of something bigger, we need to be out there, not trapped in here. She hesitated for a moment, the weight of the decision crushing her. But as the screen showed the Martian vessel exploding in a fiery burst, she made her choice. Let's go. Together, they sprinted through the station's corridors, dodging panicked civilians and armed security personnel. The distant rumble of the conflict outside vibrated through the walls, a grim reminder of the stakes. When they reached Base 7, Kale's ship, a sleek, reinforced cruiser, was waiting, its engines humming with readiness. As the ship launched, Sarah took one last look at the Solar Nexus through the viewport. The station, once a symbol of cooperation, now stood as a monument to humanity's inability to escape its own divisions. She turned to Kale, her resolve hardening. We're not just fighting for Mars or Earth, she said. We're fighting for the truth. For everyone. Kale nodded, his expression unreadable. Then let's make sure the truth is worth it. The ship accelerated into the vast expanse of space, leaving the station behind. But as they ventured into the unknown, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were heading straight into a trap. One far more dangerous than any they had faced before. The ship cut through the dark expanse of space with terrifying speed, its engines growling like a beast in pursuit of its prey. Sarah stood at the viewport, watching as the stars streaked past, her mind torn between the urgency of the mission and the ominous weight of what was unfolding. The reports from Solara Nexus were clear. Earth had launched a full-scale military operation targeting Martian strongholds. A war that had been a whisper in the background for years was now an inferno, consuming everything in its path. Beside her, Kale was focused on the control panels, his fingers flying over the keys with practiced ease. His expression was unreadable, but Sarah knew him well enough to see the simmering anger beneath the calm exterior. This was the moment he had been preparing for, the breaking point he had feared for so long. "We're too late," Sarah said, her voice tight. "The fleet's already in motion. If Earth's military is engaging Martian ships, we don't stand a chance of stopping this before it spirals out of control." Kale didn't answer immediately, his jaw set in determination. He had fought for this moment, but now that it had arrived, the reality of it seemed to weigh heavier than he had anticipated. "We don't need to stop it. We need to find out who started it, and why." The ship shuddered as they entered Mars' orbit, the red planet looming large in the viewport. The surface was marred with scars of past conflicts, and Sarah couldn't help but wonder how many more would be added to the list. A transmission crackled through the ship's comm system, and a voice filled the cockpit. "Delegate Renard, we've intercepted multiple transmissions from Earth's military fleets. They've given orders to engage Martian defenses immediately." Sarah turned to Kale, her heart sinking. This isn't just about the colonies anymore. Earth is intent on wiping Mars off the map. Kale's eyes flicked to her, his expression hardening. "If we don't act fast, Earth's not stopping at Mars. Titan will be next." Before they could respond, the comm system blared again, this time with a message from a familiar voice. "Sarah, Kale, are you there?" It was Commander Elias Vren, his voice flat and unyielding. "We've had confirmation of enemy fleet movements. Earth's military is set to destroy all Martian military assets. You need to get to Mars' surface immediately to coordinate with the Resistance." "Vren," Kale growled, his fingers tightening on the controls. "You're no better than the rest of them. Earth's making its move, and you're helping them pull the trigger." Vren's voice remained calm, almost too calm. "The situation's beyond diplomacy now. We've received orders, and we're not in a position to ignore them. If you want to help, do it quickly. Get to Mars before it's too late." The transmission ended with a sharp click, leaving only the hum of the ship's engines in the silence that followed. Sarah glanced at Kale, who was staring at the control panel, his face set in grim determination. She could see the battle raging within him, the same battle she had fought in her own heart. They descended into Mars' atmosphere with a violent jolt, the heat shields around the ship glowing orange as they plummeted toward the surface. They had no time to waste. The city of New Olympia was their destination, a sprawling metropolis built upon the Martian plains. It was also the epicenter of the Resistance, a place where Martian insurgents and sympathizers from across the colonies had gathered to prepare for this very moment. The Resistance needed more than just weapons. It needed leadership, and that was where Kale and Sarah came in. The city came into view, a chaotic maze of buildings and landing zones. The once pristine architecture now stood in ruins, the result of years of conflict and neglect. As they approached the landing zone, Sarah felt the weight of the world pressing down on her. They weren't just fighting for Mars anymore. They were fighting for humanity's future. The ship landed with a violent thud, the impact rattling their bones. Without a word, Kale was out of his seat, rushing toward the exit hatch. Sarah followed, her pulse pounding in her ears as they disembarked into the war-torn streets of New Olympia. A heavy atmosphere hung over the city, the air thick with smoke and the scent of burning metal. Martian soldiers and resistance fighters alike moved with purpose, preparing for the oncoming assault. Kale's presence was a beacon in the chaos, and soon a group of armed insurgents gathered around him, their eyes full of hope. "Kale Renard," one of the fighters said, his voice rough from exhaustion. "We need you now more than ever. The Earth fleet is too strong. We can't hold them off forever. Kale's gaze hardened, his voice steady. We're not here to fight them on our own terms. We need to get to the heart of Earth's operation, the corporations that are behind all of this. If we can shut them down, the fleets will lose their reason for attacking. Sarah nodded, stepping forward. We've uncovered evidence that Earth's military is being manipulated by corporate interests. If we can expose them, it could shift the balance. The fighter's face darkened with understanding. If that's true, we have no time to waste. They're gathering in the central hub, preparing for the final push. Kale's eyes narrowed. Then we'll take the fight to them. We need to cripple Earth's military strategy, and the only way to do that is to sever the corporation's grip on them. Sarah followed as Kale led the group through the desolate streets, the sounds of distant explosions and gunfire echoing off the buildings. They were getting closer to the central hub, closer to the source of the conflict. The final push had begun. Sarah could feel the inevitability of it settling into her bones, the realization that peace was no longer possible. War had already been unleashed, and there was no turning back. As they reached the entrance to the central hub, the ground shook beneath their feet, and a deafening roar filled the air. Earth's military had arrived in full force. The time for diplomacy was over. Now, they would fight or die trying. Ready? Kale asked, his eyes locked on the burning horizon. Sarah nodded, her resolve hardening. Let's finish this. And with that, they charged forward into the heart of the conflict. The Solaran Nexus stood once more at the heart of human affairs, its corridors bustling with diplomats, scientists, and representatives from across the solar system. Though scarred by the events of the war, the station had become a symbol of cautious hope. From its observation deck, Sarah watched as shuttles arrived and departed in a steady rhythm, their lights cutting through the void. The scene was deceptively calm, masking the uneasy truce that bound Earth and its colonies. Sarah adjusted the pin on her jacket, a simple silver circle representing unity. It had been a gift from Kale before she left Mars to serve as an intermediary in the fragile alliance. She traced its smooth edges with her thumb, grounding herself as she prepared to enter the council chamber. Inside, leaders from Earth, Mars, Titan, and other colonies waited, their agendas as varied as the stars. The chamber was a stark contrast to the chaos Sarah had known during the war. A circular table dominated the room, surrounded by representatives. Holographic displays projected maps, documents, and figures into the air, tools for navigating the delicate negotiations. Sarah took her seat beside Kale, who had been selected as Mars delegate. He nodded to her, his expression unreadable but steady. Across the table sat Commander Elias Vren, now Earth's official envoy. Though the war had ended, the tension between him and Kale was palpable, a reminder of the battles they had fought on opposite sides. Vren's sharp gaze swept the room before settling on Sarah. Diplomat Kellen, he began, his voice clipped but measured. I trust you reviewed the latest proposals from Earth's High Council. Our concessions are substantial, and we expect the colonies to meet us halfway. Sarah met his gaze, refusing to be intimidated. We've reviewed them, Commander, and while your concessions are appreciated, they fall short of addressing the autonomy the colonies require. The people of Mars, Titan, and beyond won't accept anything less than true self-governance. Kale leaned forward, his tone firm. What Sarah means is that Earth's proposal still place colonial affairs under Earth's oversight. That's not autonomy. It's control by another name. Vren's jaw tightened. Control ensures stability. Without it, the colonies risk descending into chaos. Earth has invested centuries into building the system. We can't simply walk away. Sarah took a deep breath, her voice calm but resolute. Stability can't come at the cost of freedom. The war proved that centralized control breeds resentment and division. We need a new model, one that values cooperation over dominance. The room fell silent as the weight of her words settled over the delegates. Vren leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke. And what does this new model look like in your vision? Sarah glanced at Kale, who gave her a subtle nod. She activated the holographic display, projecting a map of the solar system. Points of light marked Earth, the colonies, and the major trade routes that connected them. "We propose the creation of a council of systems," Sarah said, her voice steady. "Each colony in Earth would have equal representation, with decisions made collectively. Trade, defense, and shared resources would be managed by the council, while individual colonies retain their autonomy. No one system holds dominance over another." The room erupted in murmurs, some skeptical, others intrigued. Vren's eyes narrowed. "And who enforces this council's decisions? Who ensures compliance?" "No one," Kale said firmly. "The point is mutual respect. If a system disagrees, it has the right to dissent. The council exists to mediate and find solutions, not to dictate." Sarah added, "It's not perfect, but it's better than the alternative. If we return to the old ways, this truce won't hold. We'll end up back where we started, at war." Vren regarded her for a long moment, his expression inscrutable. Then he turned to the rest of the table. "I'll take this proposal to Earth's High Council, but I won't make promises. They'll need to see that this isn't just another power grab by the colonies." "It's not," Sarah said, her voice steady. "It's survival. For all of us." The meeting adjourned shortly after, the delegates dispersing to their quarters. Sarah lingered in the chamber, gazing at the holographic map still floating above the table. The solar system felt vast and fragile, a web of connections that could either strengthen or unravel depending on the choices made in the days ahead. Kale approached her, his footsteps quiet on the polished floor. "You handled that well," he said, his tone softer than usual. "Did I?" she replied, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Half the room looked ready to walk out. They didn't, though. "That's what matters." He stood beside her, his gaze fixed on the map. "Do you think they'll go for it? The Council of Systems?" "I don't know," she admitted, "but it's the best chance we have. The alternative is another war, and I don't think anyone can survive that." Kale was silent for a moment, then placed a hand on her shoulder. "You've done more than anyone to get us here, Sarah. Whatever happens next, just know that—" She looked at him, his words both comforting and heavy. "We've all sacrificed to get here, Kale. The question is whether it's enough." As the lights dimmed in the chamber, they stood together in the quiet, united by the hope that their fragile unity could hold. The path forward was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it felt possible. And sometimes, possibility was all you needed to begin again.